Hey everyone, I'm Felicia Kashevaroff, relationship coach and founder of Tend Task. Let me ask you something. Who's planning your wedding? And before you say we are, I want you to think about who's actually carrying the mental load. Who remembers how much the photographer costs? The venue requires a final head count 2 weeks out, and your college roommate is bringing a +1 that you've never met. What nobody tells you about wedding planning, it's not romantic collaboration. It's the mental load on steroids. If you're not careful, you're about to spend tens of thousands of dollars on intensive training for your future spouse that carrying your shared life in their brain is your job, not theirs. Today, we're talking about the mental load, why wedding planning is basically relationship training camp, and how to avoid accidentally designing a lifetime of resentment. Let's talk about what the mental load actually means, because if you've never heard this term, it's about to explain your entire life. The mental load is the invisible work of remembering, planning, and coordinating everything that keeps life running smoothly. It's holding all the information in your brain and managing all the moving pieces. Wedding planning, it's the mental load on absolute steroids. Think about what you're actually carrying in your brain during wedding planning. You're tracking vendor deadlines, guest dietary restrictions, family drama dynamics, budget categories, timeline coordination, and about 47 different decisions that need to be made by next Tuesday. Your brain becomes the central command center for your wedding. You're running constant mental calculations. If the photographer runs late, will we have enough time for cocktail hour? If it rains, do we have enough backup plans? If Uncle Bob brings his new wife, will that create seating chart chaos? This becomes particularly exhausting because it's not just managing your own preferences and decisions. You're also managing everyone else's emotions about your decisions. Your stressed out mother's feelings about the guest list, your partner's anxiety about the budget, your in-laws' opinions about traditions, and making sure everyone feels heard while you're drowning in logistics. So now you're carrying the mental load of planning and the emotional work of managing how everyone feels about your planning. It's like being a project manager and a therapist simultaneously. The part that should really concern you, if one person is carrying most of the mental load during wedding planning, what makes you think that's going to magically change after you say I do? Wedding planning is basically a 6 to 12 month intensive training program for your marriage dynamic. You're practicing who remembers what, who tracks what, who manages what, and who's responsible for keeping everything together. Most couples are accidentally practicing inequality. When one person carries most of the mental load during wedding planning, several things happen. First, that person develops what I call default expertise. They become the go-to person for information about your shared life. They know which vendors are reliable, they understand your family's needs, they figured out how to manage complex logistics. This creates a knowledge gap that becomes really hard to close later. Second, the other person gets comfortable being managed instead of co-managing. When someone else is tracking deadlines and holding information, you don't develop those mental systems yourself. You become someone who helps rather than someone who co-owns your shared life. Third, and this is where it gets really problematic, the person carrying the mental load starts carrying the emotional load of managing everyone's feelings about how the mental load is distributed. I don't want to nag, but did you call the band? I know you're busy, but we really need to decide on flowers. I'm sorry for being controlling, but someone needs to track this stuff. Now you've got one person doing the thinking, the tracking, and the emotional management of how everyone feels about who's doing the thinking and tracking. Once this pattern gets established, it becomes incredibly difficult to change. The mental load carrier starts taking on more because it's easier than explaining everything. The helper backs off because they feel criticized or incompetent when they don't know information that their partner has been tracking. You're not just planning a party. You're designing the mental architecture of your marriage. If that architecture is based on one person holding everything together, while the other person helps when asked, you're building a parent-child dynamic, not a partnership. I promise that will come back to bite you. So, How do you actually share the mental load during wedding planning? How do you avoid training yourselves for a lifetime of resentment? First, divide mental ownership, not just tasks. Don't have one person become the wedding brain who delegates tasks to the other person. That's still mental load inequality. One person holds all the information and manages the other's participation. Instead, create separate domains of complete mental ownership. One person might own venue and catering. They research options, track communications, remember deadlines, manage vendor relationships, and hold all related information. The other person owns music and photography. Same deal, complete mental ownership. This means if someone asks about ceremony timeline details, they ask the ceremony owner, not the wedding person. You're both wedding experts in your areas. Second, build separate information systems that coordinate. Each person manages their own vendor communications, deadlines, and decisions. Use shared tools for big picture coordination, calendars, budgets, timelines, but each person inputs and manages their own information. No mental outsourcing, no, can you remind me to call the DJ? No, what's the photographer's email again? You each carry your own mental load and manage your own systems. Third, create structured times for information sharing and joint decision making. Weekly partnership meetings where you share updates from your areas, coordinate timelines, and make decisions that affect both domains. This is crucial. Both people come prepared with their own information. You're not having one person brief the other person on everything that's happening. You're having two experts coordinate their expertise. Watch for these red flags. If one person is researching options and presenting them to the other person for approval, that's mental load inequality. If one person is tracking deadlines for both persons' responsibilities, that's mental load inequality. If one person becomes the information hub that everyone contacts about wedding details, that's mental load inequality. On the emotional piece, if one person is managing everyone's feelings about wedding decisions, reassuring family members, smoothing over vendor conflicts, keeping everyone happy, that emotional work should also be shared. The bottom line, your wedding planning is intensive training for how your marriage will work. If one person is carrying the mental load while the other person helps when convenient, you're not building a partnership, you're training yourselves for inequality. You have the opportunity right now to design something different. You can use wedding planning to practice true partnership instead of accidentally training for resentment. Don't let tradition convince you that one person should be the detail person. Don't let efficiency arguments convince you that it's easier for one person to track everything. Build the mental load sharing you actually want to live with. Like this video if you're ready to share the mental load from day one. Subscribe for more reality checks about relationship dynamics. Tell me in the comments, who's really carrying the mental load in your wedding planning? Let's get honest about this. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're not just planning a wedding, you're training for marriage.